Excellencies, we will begin the program now. If everybody could be seated, please. Your Excellency, Ms. Leila Ben Ali, President of the 6th UN Environment Assembly and Minister of Energy Transition and Sustainable Development for the Kingdom of Morocco. Your Excellency, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya. Excellencies, heads of state and government, distinguished delegates, welcome to this high-level segment of the 6th session of the UN Environment Assembly. My name is Keisha Rukikaire. I work with UNEA Communications. Allow me to introduce first some of our senior leadership here at the UN. We have the President of the UN General Assembly, Mr. Dennis Francis. We have the President of the UN Economic and Social Council, Ms. Paula Narvaez. We have the Executive Director of the UN Environment Programme, Ms. Inge Anderson. Now, before proceedings begin, it is my great pleasure to introduce some homegrown talent to give you a flavor of Kenya's rich musical culture. The Ghetto Classics Orchestra is a community program involving more than 500 children from Korogosho, which is an informal settlement in Nairobi. They use music education to provide these young people with opportunities to better themselves and their communities, including bettering their environments. We will also be treated to an East Coast rap battle featuring Dex McBean from Brooklyn on North America's East Coast and Frida Amani, straight out of Dar es Salaam on Africa's East Coast. Now, just before these performances, I welcome you to watch a short video on the incredible story of the Ghetto Classics Orchestra. Thank you.
Every person deserves to grow and live in a healthy environment. But the reality for millions of people today is far, far away from this. Our hurting planet is leaving us sick, poor, and weak. But it can be different. Dreams can take flight in the most unexpected places. If we work together, like a grand orchestra, we can create a different future for ourselves and the planet. Where each instrument plays its part. Each melody, each harmony and drum beat, all working in rhyme. Together, we can achieve the future we want and return to harmony with nature.
Give it up one more time for Ghetto Classics Orchestra. All right. It's the 50th anniversary of hip hop. Do any of our member nations, do y'all like hip hop? Yeah? Senegal, I see you. All right. Hey, is anybody in here down with the United Nations Environment Program? Make some noise. Here we go. When I say get with the, y'all say program. Get with the
Program.
Get with the
Program.
When I say get with the, y'all say program. Get with the
Program.
Get with the
Program. Hello. My name is Frida Amani from Tanzania. Oi. First up, today's a celebration. We on the right track to a better destination. I would like to say congratulations. Say you and did it for every nation.
Wait, what? Pardon the interruption. All these accomplishments and really you've accomplished nothing. Species extinction, pollution as the temperature rises. We're in the middle of a triple planetary
Listen,
crisis.
we don't deny this triple planetary crisis. Exactly why UNEP exists. Together is the only way our planet gets fixed. The Earth can heal itself with less human interference. We also what happened during the pandemic.
Whoa, don't even mention that.
You see exactly where I'm getting at. Nature's continuity, human creativity equals better planet for you and me. Our impact ecologically, multilateral policy is how we protect Mother Earth. Our apologies, better global quality, and together possibly might even lower a few temperature degrees.
Whoa, free to chill. All of that is just polar ice cap. We need to scale back all of this greenhouse gas. 2023, hottest year in recorded history. What's multilateralism to me? Might as well be Swahili.
Sending a mango, how we gon' heal the planet, protect endangered species, reverse climate damage.
Get with the program.
Together we can heal the planet, protect endangered species, reverse climate damage. Get with the program. How we gon' heal the planet, protect endangered species, reverse
Climate damage.
Get with the program.
New York to Kenya, long as our nations all come together.
Muda huu wakati huu ni wetu kulinda kutunza dunia yetu kwa pamoja tusoge tungane kwa mazingira mina wetu jitole.
Okay, but vipi tutakuwapa mema kujenga nyenzo wakati mpango ni wa mataifa uwezo. How we get together,
Yeah.
all of our interests differ.
Yes.
This policy leaves only paper tigers unendangered. Multilateralism, yes. Local, not only global. Communities know best the effects of everything we go through. Biodiversity loss
Yeah.
at an incredible cost. Don't think there's much the UN can do to reverse this course.
I understand your frustration,
Okay.
just try and give us patience. 2020 to 2030 is the time for restoration.
Multilateralism is your vision. It's hard to make decisions and get the member nations to all honor their
Yes,
commitments.
the challenges are proven, but so are the solution, like the Laos Agreement Fund to end plastic pollution.
Oh, it won't be easy, but I'm understanding your plan. The best thing for us to come together
Hey,
and
get with the program, how we gon' heal the planet, protect endangered species, reverse.
climate damage.
Get with the program, together we can heal the planet, protect endangered species.
Reverse climate damage.
Get with the program,
Together we
we
gon'
gon' heal the planet, protect endangered species.
reverse climate damage.
Get with the program,
New York to Kenya, long as our nations all come together.
Get with the
When I
program,
say get with the, y'all say program. Get with the,
program,
get with the.
program.
When I say get with the, y'all say program.
Get with the program,
Get with the program.
how we gon' heal the planet, protect endangered species, reverse climate damage. Get with the program, Brooklyn to Tanzania, long as our nations unite together like Pangea. Get with the program, how
Together
we gon' heal the planet, protect endangered species, reverse climate damage. Get with the program, New York to Kenya, long as our nations
all
unite
come-
together. Get with the program,
When I say get with the, y'all say program. Get with the,
program,
get with the.
program.
Make some noise for yourselves. Shout out to the UNEP. Shout out to Event Rep. Frida, thank you.
Huge thanks to those fantastic acts, Ghetto Classics, Dex McBean and Frida Amani, who are helping us get with the program this morning. And now, to begin formal proceedings, I will invite Her Excellency Ms. Leila Ben Ali, President of UNEA 6, to open the event. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to call to order the third plenary meeting and to declare open the high-level segment of the sixth session of the United Nations Environment Assembly. A warm welcome to everyone who has gathered here for the high-level segment of the Assembly, which is taking place on the agenda item 9 on the theme Effective, Inclusive and Sustainable Multilateral Actions to Tackle Climate Change, Biodiversity Loss and Pollution. I am informed that more than 5,500 participants have joined us for the sixth session of the Environment Assembly, which is indeed a testament of the growing recognition of UNEA as the center of multilateralism and the role of Nairobi as the environmental capital of the world. As you may know, the high-level segment consists of the present opening plenary, national statements, 3 leadership dialogues, 1 multi-stakeholder dialogue, and the closing plenary tomorrow afternoon. And I look forward to continue working closely with you within the next 2 days to make this session a success. I now have the honor to address the Assembly. Excellency, Dr. William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya and Commander-in-Chief of the Kenya Defense Forces. Excellency Denis Francis, President of the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Excellency Paula Narvaez, President of the United Nations Economic and Social Council. Excellency Mrs. Inga Anderson, Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme. Dear heads of states, excellencies, honorable ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the sixth session of the United Nations Environment Assembly, hosted in Nairobi, the home of the United Nations Environment Programme for over 50 years. Marhaba, bienvenue, welcome, bienvenido, and karibu. Another Swahili word that I learned during my visit to the Karura forest to plant trees, thanks to the exceptional leadership of President Dr. William Ruto and First Lady Rachel Ruto on environment and ecosystem restoration, is mazingira. Which means environment. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, we take great pride in the progress made on the global environmental agenda, but we know that we are fast approaching the point of no return, where human progress is at risk. In many areas of the world, the point of no return was already reached. 3.2 billion people, or 40% of the world's population, is suffering from ecosystem degradation, requiring immediate action. We are here to ensure that multilateralism is strengthened to deliver solutions critical to tackling the planetary environmental crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution, and their side effects of desertification, ecosystem degradation, and drought. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, let me say a few words about environmental multilateralism. In 2024, we have many reasons to be distracted by our mission of putting the world on a sustainable development path, since we are all facing 3 inflection points wherever we live. In 2024, there are at least 2 major armed conflicts in Europe and the Middle East, with devastating effects and global geopolitical, economic, and social implications that are felt in every part of the world. That is inflection point number one. The second inflection point that might be distracting us as politicians and as policymakers is that 40% of the world's population might be electing or is electing its leaders this year. Leaders that might change or even reverse sustainability policies and achievements. And Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the third inflection point in 2024 is that the multilateral system is under unprecedented pressure, to say the least. That is why UNEA 6, the highest level multilateral decision-making body on environmental issues gathering in 2024 in Nairobi, Kenya, is critical. We are here at UNEA 6 to consolidate the achievements of our predecessors and to stay focused on our mission. We are here because we firmly believe in multilateral cooperation and international solidarity. My deep appreciation to UNEP for supporting member states and helping us stay focused on our mission at this critical time. My most sincere appreciation to UNEP Executive Director, Mrs. Inger Anderson, and her team for their unwavering commitment to steer global efforts to strengthen the environmental pillar of Sustainable Development Goals. And my sincere appreciations to UNON DG Zainab Bangura and her staff for all the logistical and security services 24/7. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, yes, the multilateral system is under unprecedented pressure. And yes, we can rise to the challenge and deliver. His Majesty, King Mohammed VI, in his message to COP28 Dubai, emphasized this urgency. Quoting, quote, the IMF World Bank annual meetings held in Marrakesh concluded that there was a pressing need to reform multilateralism and development financing. Two levers humanity came up with to meet the challenges of the 20th century, two levers in which we believe. It is that conviction which is motivating my country as President of the United Nations Environment Assembly. Unquote, end of His Majesty's statement. This assembly focuses on addressing threats to species and ecosystems, and threats to our air, our soil, our waters. This assembly is about committing to decisive actions and credible solutions. In 2024, we have no choice but to act faster and with greater ambition. Environmental threats are disproportionately affecting some communities more than others. Science tells us that impacts we are facing are worsening. Last year was the hottest on record. Catastrophic events like raging storms, terrible droughts, devastating wildfires are becoming the new normals. But we have the solutions in nature, in our technologies, in innovations, in finance. And we know what is possible when we come together armed with ambition, with an open mind, and with unity. Because multilateralism works. One great example is the negotiations underway on the global treaty to end plastic pollution. This was a key outcome of the previous assembly that is only possible to implement if we stop the blame game and the finger pointing. We have the opportunity to leave our mark this year too, in committing to ambitious actions on a range of environmental challenges. We must drive inclusive and multilateral action and focus on our energy on key and credible solutions. And the good news is that we have examples from around the world that we can emulate, from governments, from enterprises, from youth, civil society, local communities, that we can use to protect environmental health, to protect human health, and to protect human lives. We are convinced that the promise of revamping environmental multilateralism during this UN decade of ecosystem restoration cannot be delivered without a coordinated effort between the UN system and the most driven, the most enlightened leadership from the private and public sectors with cutting-edge technologies, investments in R&D, innovative funding expertise, and with sustainable engagement with local communities. That is why I've taken the initiative to put together a group of like-minded, purpose-driven leaders who share the personal sense of urgency to advance environmental multilateralism and to align financial flows with science and sustainability. These leaders pledge to coordinate with the UN system to build a better engagement from industry, and I've addressed a letter to His Excellency UN Secretary General so this group could form the Alliance of Goodwill Environmentalists and could possibly act as a much-needed support for upcoming UNEA's presidencies, including from the Global South. Excellencies, dear colleagues, as President of this Assembly, my vision is to scale up efforts to overcome our challenges. We must pragmatically look at what we know works and scale that up faster and better. We must nurture what unites us and build on the synergies between the different multilateral environmental agreements and other multilateral agencies. But I also believe, given the fast pace of innovation, that we must stay curious regarding solutions that are yet to be proven, so that we can take, as policymakers, informed and science-based decisions at the right time. Action, credibility, and implementation at all levels is the only way for the resolutions adopted by this Assembly to help us to build the roadmap we want for the environment and sustainable development. In the draft ministerial declaration, we agreed as member states to take ambitious action to achieve climate-resilient development and protect our communities against disasters exacerbated by the triple planetary crisis. We are on the verge of agreeing, Excellencies and dear colleagues, to elevate action to tackle all forms of pollution. We need greater cooperation to ensure a just and sustainable energy transition, an energy-secure future for all, while respecting local and national needs, including when it comes to inflation, poverty, and debt sustainability. And we must deploy greater efforts to enhance sustainable mining, incorporate land degradation, desertification, and drought into disaster risk management, and also to achieve gender equality and to empower youth and children, because after all, we are doing this for them. And let's ensure that our actions will be truly and credibly leaving no one behind. Excellencies, dear colleagues, it is my hope that this Environment Assembly will demonstrate that challenges are best addressed when the community of nations and citizens of the world join forces with an open mind. Our efforts today will be crucial to secure our world for the benefit of our people and our planet. To conclude, Excellencies and dear colleagues, I continue to count on your commitment and look forward to working with you in this United Nations Environment Assembly to deliver on the expectations of the international community and the expectations of our people. Thank you very much. It is now my honor to invite His Excellency Denis Francis, President of the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly, to address the Environment Assembly.
Your Excellency Dr. William Samoei Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya. Your Excellency Paula Narvaez, President of the United Nations Economic and Social Council. Ms. Inga Anderson, Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme. Her Excellency Laila Ben Ali, President of UNEA in its 6th session, esteemed heads of state and government, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, Director General of the World Health Organization, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to express my sincere appreciation to Your Excellency, the President of Kenya, and to the government and people of Kenya for the gracious hospitality extended to me and my delegation since our arrival to attend this auspicious 6th session of the United Nations Environment Assembly. I would like also to congratulate Madam President of the Assembly, Your Excellency Laila Benali, the Minister of Energy, Transition, Sustainable Development of the Kingdom of Morocco, for her steadfast leadership as President of the Assembly in advancing the pivotal discussions on the agenda. It is an honor to be in Nairobi, a significant UN hub and home of UNEP. My attendance in UNEA 6 also affords me, as President of the UN General Assembly, the opportunity to engage with government representatives and the host country, civil society, the scientific community, and the private sector on how best to unleash multilateral action across the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. One cannot but feel the strength in numbers today and the timeliness of this forum as an additional platform to tap our collective potential and comparative advantages to make a real difference in reviving our strained multilateral system. Excellencies, we are without doubt at a critical moment for the planet and for the unity of purpose we will need if we hope to achieve our 2030 aspirations. For years, we have known that a healthy environment is both an essential requirement for and a key enabler of a more safe, just, and prosperous tomorrow. Yet we are woefully off track in meeting the Sustainable Development Goals, the only comprehensive blueprint that was designed to offer ambitious, targeted solutions to address the converging challenges of our time. At the 2023 SDG Summit, world leaders acknowledged this reality and pledged to accelerate progress across all SDGs, including by tackling environmental issues. In the landmark political declaration adopted in September, the world leaders called for stronger implementation of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement, especially in the areas of mitigation, adaptation, and means of implementation. They vowed to take action, urgent action, to halt and to reverse biodiversity loss, including by ensuring the fair and equitable sharing of benefits from genetic resource use. And importantly, they acknowledged the serious threats posed by plastic, air, and chemical pollution, expressing firm support for an internationally, legally binding instrument on plastic pollution. This is groundbreaking work that is already underway and making history here in Nairobi. As the world's Parliament on the Environment, the United Nations Environment Assembly is supremely well placed to advance these priorities and to bring about the tangible, integrated results we urgently need across the sustainable development continuum. As the international community, we must move the dial because the current trajectory is not ideal, to say the least. The global temperature has risen 1.5 degrees over a 12-month period, for the first time on record. Plastic particulates have been found in every ecosystem on the planet. As UNEP and others conducting research have long warned, if we do nothing, the volume of plastic production will continue to spiral out of control, and by 2050 there will be more plastic in the oceans than fish. And biodiversity is degrading at the fastest rate in history, while air, water, and land pollution are causing 9 million premature deaths each year. I repeat, 9 million premature deaths each year. Given that we are confronting an environmental emergency and the consequential need to act with urgency, we must ensure that the outcome of this UNEA 6 advances the human right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, that it promotes truly multilateral responses to restore the balance with nature, and that the UNEA 6 outcomes bring about a future that is more equitable, inclusive, and resilient for all peoples everywhere. As President of the General Assembly, I proudly embrace my duty to maximize convergence, to create spaces for constructive dialogue, and to encourage member states and stakeholders alike to work shoulder to shoulder in advancing balanced progress. There are several prime opportunities on the horizon. The third UN Conference on Landlocked Developing Countries and the fourth International Conference on Small Island Developing States are pivotal occasions to support countries that have contributed the least but are disproportionately impacted by the effects of climate change and biodiversity loss. In addition, the General Assembly will convene in an inaugural Sustainability Week from 15th to 19th April at United Nations headquarters in New York. The high-level gathering, a cornerstone of my presidency, will feature sustainability-focused events in the sectors of transport, tourism, energy, and infrastructure, along with a signature event on debt sustainability and socio-economic equality, all aimed at catalyzing a giant leap towards the shared future we want. To that end, I encourage all member states to participate at the highest possible levels. Equally, I wholeheartedly applaud UNEA's 6 aims to amplify the Summit of the Future and its anticipated outcome, the Pact of the Future, through its ministerial declaration to be adopted this week. I have no doubt that this will be an invaluable input for the summit, as world leaders will gather in New York in September to seek to revitalize multilateral cooperation and forge a new global consensus on how to deliver better for people and planet. In all these endeavors, let us be clear that we are called to action in the service of, quote unquote, we the peoples, especially all those who have been underserved and at highest risk of being further left behind, the LDCs, the LLDCs, and the SIDS, and those underrepresented at the negotiation table to advocate for better solutions, that is, women, children, indigenous peoples, persons belonging to minority groups, and other vulnerable communities. Translating commitments into meaningful change means stepping up implementation of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda by significantly scaling up finances for sustainable development and providing the means of implementation to developing countries. It means forging the strong and diverse partnerships that will be essential for our success. And it means mobilizing and allocating the financial and technological support to implement sustainable and environmentally sound solutions. Without being overly optimistic, and as we chart the path ahead, let me conclude with a quote from Maurice Strong, UNEP's first executive director and pioneer of global sustainable development, who once said that, and I quote, "I am convinced the prophets of doom have to be taken seriously. I'm equally convinced with the desired unity of purpose that we can and must usher in a new era of planetary stewardship, one that catalyzes action across multiple fronts to bring about peace, prosperity, progress, and sustainability for all, everywhere. I stand ready to mobilize the General Assembly to that end. Yes, we are facing formidable challenges, but I firmly believe that we can overcome the deepening geopolitical tensions, acting in unison and laser-focused in our ambition. We stand a better chance to succeed in overcoming the myriad of challenges we are up against. I thank you.
Thank you very much to the President of the General Assembly for this statement. I am pleased now to invite Her Excellency Paula Narvaez, President of the Economic and Social Council, to address the Environment Assembly.
Su Excelencia,
Your Excellencies, President Dr. William Samoei Ruto, Excellency President of the UNGA, Dennis Francis, Executive Director of UNEP, Inga Anderson, President of UNEA 6, Ms. Leila Ben-Ali, Authority, ladies and gentlemen, directors of the executive bodies of the United Nations, distinguished guests, it's a great pleasure for me to join you today at the 6th session of the United Nations Environment Assembly. As we meet, the world faces unprecedented challenges that demand urgent and collective action. The theme of UNEA 6, effective, inclusive, and sustainable multilateral actions to tackle climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution, underscore the magnitude of the crises we are confronting and the imperative for decisive measures to address them. The triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution threatens the very foundation of our existence. The numbers themselves speak volumes. 1.3 billion people are at risk from the impacts of climate change. 1 million species face extinction due to human activities. Pollution in its various forms claims the lives of 9 million people annually. At the midpoint of the 2030 agenda, we find ourselves at a critical juncture. The goals we set out to achieve are ambitious, yet attainable. But the pace of progress is insufficient, and the challenges before us are daunting. To put it in terms of numbers, 50% of the Sustainable Development Goal targets lack sufficient progress. That's half. 30% have stalled or reversed, and 15% are off track. The 2023 Sustainable Development Goals Summit outcome made it clear that while strides have been made, much remains to be done.
to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. In order to do so, we must recognize the interconnectedness of the goals and the imperative for us to act in synergy. We cannot afford to address these challenges in isolation. They must be tackled holistically, with a comprehensive understanding of their interlinkages. No more fragmentation. There are many examples that underscore the urgent need for coordinated and integrated approaches, as demonstrated by the recent report, Synergy Solutions for a World in Crisis, Tackling Climate and SDG Action Together, issued by UNDESA and UNFCCC. The report highlights some notable data points which make the case for such synergies. For example, evidence links climate action to 80% of the 2030 Agenda targets, providing opportunities for impactful, integrated policies. Health and agricultural co-benefits can offset climate policy costs and boost global GDP. So there are opportunities. Effective climate policies can lower the cost of achieving universal electricity access in sub-Saharan Africa. And aligning climate and SDG efforts could boost economic output by a staggering $43 trillion by 2070. The benefits of such integrated approaches are undeniable, and yet they will require deliberate efforts to tailor our policies and our actions. I believe that this is possible. Distinguished delegates, I've begun preparations to convene the 2024 High-Level Political Forum under the auspices of ECOSOC in July. It comes on the heels of the 2023 SDG Summit and UNEA 6. The outcomes of this assembly will feed into the high-level political forum deliberations and undoubtedly will make an important contribution to the work of the Council, particularly its review of SDG 13 relating to climate action. But without losing from view the interaction with the other objectives, goals, poverty, food security, and solid institutions. As we embark on our deliberations at this UNEA 6, allow us to reaffirm our commitment to effective, inclusive, and sustainable multilateral actions. Let us seize this opportunity to raise our ambitions for an outcome that has an enormous impact, to forge new partnerships, mobilize resources, and catalyze transformative change. The world is watching us and asks for solutions. I offer the ECOSOC as a platform for working in an integrated manner which will allow us to make progress and have sustainable outcomes and to make this a reality. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias a la señora Presidenta.
Thank you so much to the President of the ECOSOC.
Assembly to view a video message of His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, who was unable to join us in person.
President Ruto, dear leaders, excellencies, friends, thank you for coming together at this important assembly to tackle the environmental crisis we face. Your efforts are urgent. Our planet is on the brink. Ecosystems are collapsing. Our climate is imploding, and humanity is to blame. The fallout from poisoned rivers to rising seas harm us all. Yet, those least responsible suffer most, a burning injustice. We must work together to combat this crisis, recognizing the links between them. to put the world on a sustainable path and turbocharge sustainable development. That means taking urgent action to accelerate a just transition from fossil fuels to renewables, to adapt to extreme weather, deliver climate justice, get a grip on pollution, protect and restore ecosystems, and drive progress towards the other targets in the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Countries must set national targets to deliver that framework. They must capitalize the new Loss and Damage Fund, and they must create new economy-wide nationally determined contributions by 2025 that align with limiting global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Together, we need governments to deliver a new treaty on plastic pollution and to massively increase finance for sustainable development and for climate and biodiversity action in developing countries. I urge countries to deliver our proposed SDG stimulus. And all commitments made by developed countries must be met. We must also ensure that production and trade of those minerals critical to the renewables revolution is sustainable and provides maximum benefit to developing countries. The United Nations Panel on Critical Energy Transition Minerals will support these efforts. This Assembly plays a vital role in driving environmental action. And you have shown before that you can unite and deliver, most recently with your historic decision to negotiate a plastic treaty. I urge you to do so again and go further. There are many important resolutions before you, so please take this chance to drive multilateral solutions. Let's see the Nairobi spirit deliver once again. Thank you.
Thank you to His Excellency the Secretary General for his good wishes for this session. It's now my pleasure to invite Mrs. Inger Andersen, Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, to address the Assembly.
Your Excellency William Samoei Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, Excellencies here gathered to the UNEA, Excellency Denis Francis, President of the General Assembly of the United Nations, Excellency Paula Navais, President of ECOSOC, ministers, ambassadors, delegates, partners and friends, activists, welcome to Nairobi. Special welcome, of course, to my colleagues from the United Nations. It's a pleasure to see you all here from other agencies. Welcome to this high-level opening of the 6th session of the United Nations Environment Assembly here in beautiful Nairobi, our home, the environmental capital of the world, as we like to call it. My thanks to you, President Ruto, for continuing to strengthen Kenya's commitment to UNEP and indeed to global environmental action. Excellencies, we are here because the environmental crises facing the world are spreading and intensifying. We are living in an age of a climate emergency, and the warning lights on the planetary dashboard are glowing red hot. We are living in an age of withering nature, of dying lands and vanishing species. We're living in an age of a planet and people poisoned by chemicals and plastic, by waste and pollution of all kinds. Our high carbon, resource-hungry growth has sent some planetary systems teetering on the edge of the tipping points. Once these systems fail, they may not rise again, and humanity itself might also find itself flawed. But we cannot and must not despair, because the power of change lies with us, with you, with the members of this assembly, the governments they represent and who make up the wider UNEA and the UNEP family, from the multilateral environmental agreements to the scientists, from civil society to youth, from indigenous people to businesses and financiers who know that they must do things differently. We, this big global family, must stand together and push back against that triple planetary crisis, the crisis of climate change, the crisis of nature and land loss, and the crisis of pollution and waste, to create space for the climate to stabilize, for nature to recover, and for us to deal with pollution, and in so doing, providing the basis for our economies and our societies to flourish and to flourish sustainably. We must push back against this crisis in lockstep to create space for those who follow, and in so doing, creating intergenerational equity and helping youth go stronger and wiser than those who went before them did. Excellencies, we cannot push back with the force required if we are divided. True strength comes from unity. So I ask this assembly, as the Secretary General just did, to do what it does best. I ask this assembly to put aside national and regional differences and remember that we live on this one little blue planet called Earth. Think of the planetary cycles, not electoral cycles. Think long term, look beyond the horizon. Remember that if my air is dirty, if my climate is changing, if my shores are awash with plastic, yours are too. If we stand together, or we will either stand together or we will fall together. That is inclusive multilateralism. So I ask this assembly to once again show the Nairobi spirit, that spirit which we believe lives here on these rolling hills in Gigiri, that spirit that 2 years ago put us on a path to end plastic pollution. And I ask that you conclude the hard work that has gone on over the past weeks and months by passing the resolutions and decisions on the table in the strongest form possible, and to show the world that the Nairobi spirit is alive and well. And of course, once passed, to expeditiously implement them with determination. But I also ask you to recall that this assembly is more than just a set of resolutions or decisions. This is where the global community gathers to think and to dream bigger, to reimagine how we can work better and smarter and harder and faster together to hold the future that we want in our mind's eye and to make it happen. We saw that vision yesterday when the many multilateral environmental agreements that set the global guardrails on the environment came together here in Nairobi for the first time. It was a bit of a family reunion. They sought ways to lift each other up, to unite, and to become more than the sum of their parts. These agreements have already delivered many results. Let's recall some. Protecting the ozone layer. Many species and huge areas of land and sea protected. Slowed the rate of climate change. Raised the profile of desertification and land degradation action. Eliminated toxic substances dangerous to human and planetary health, and much, much more. Made in UNEP, these MEAs are making massive progress wherever they are and really delivering on environmental multilateralism. If they can do, they are here, and by unifying their efforts and by following suit, we can make a much stronger future that we all want become reality. Excellencies, as I said, we are living in an age of intensifying environmental threats, but we are also living in an age of cascading commitments, hope, and action. The environmental movement, as embodied in this assembly, is bigger than ever, stronger than ever, more united than ever. We can push back against the triple planetary crisis if we show unity of purpose at this assembly and beyond. We can purpose to shun fossil fuels and look towards renewable energy sources, purpose to conserve and restore the natural world and our lands, which gives us life, purpose to keep harmful chemicals, pollution, and waste out of our ecosystem, and yes, out of our bodies. This is our great task, the most important one we will ever undertake. Billions of people are depending on us to succeed. Let's not let them down. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your inspiring remarks, as usual, my dear Inga Andersen. And I wish to take this opportunity to thank the entire UNEP Secretariat for the tireless efforts and the Deputy Executive Director, Mrs. Elizabeth Mrema, in leading the preparations of this session. I now have the pleasure to invite Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, Director General of the World Health Organization, to address the Assembly.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Jambo. Habari yako? Salamu Kenya. Thank you. Your Excellency, President William Ruto, Your Excellency Dennis Francis, President of the UN General Assembly, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Honorable Minister Laila Ben-Ali, President of the UN Environment Assembly, Excellency Paula Narvaez, President of ECOSOC, and my colleague and sister Executive Director Inge Andersen, Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends. It's an honor to be here, and I thank Inge and UNEP for the invitation to address you today. The health of humans, animals, and our environment are woven together in a bond that's inextricable, yet fragile. This is not a new realization. The father of medicine, Hippocrates, said, "The physician treats, nature heals." We're now relearning what humans have always known, but which, since the Industrial Revolution, we have forgotten or ignored, that when we harm our environment, we harm ourselves. For centuries, we have plundered our planet in the name of progress. Now, we're paying the price with a triple planetary crisis: climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. If our planet were a patient, it would be admitted to intensive care. Its vital signs are alarming. It's running a fever, with each of the last 9 months the hottest on record. As we hurtle towards the 1.5-degree threshold, its lung capacity is compromised, with the destruction of forests that absorb carbon dioxide and produce oxygen. And many of the Earth's water sources, its lifeblood, are contaminated. Most concerning of all, its condition is deteriorating rapidly. Is it any wonder then that human health is suffering when the health of the planet on which we depend is in peril? More frequent and severe weather events cause deaths and injuries, as you know, and damage to health facilities and other essential infrastructure. More heat waves contribute to more cardiovascular disease. Air pollution drives lung cancer, asthma, and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Chemicals such as lead cause intellectual disability, cardiovascular, and kidney disease. And drought and water scarcity affect food production, making healthy diets less affordable. Meanwhile, climate change is leading to shifts in the behavior distribution, movement, range, and intensity of mosquitoes, birds, and other animals that are spreading infectious diseases such as dengue and malaria to new areas. Illegal wildlife trading also increases the risk of zoonotic spillover that can trigger a pandemic, highlighting the importance of primary prevention to reduce risk. The threats to health from climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss are not hypothetical risks in the future. They're right here and right now, which makes health the most compelling reason for climate action. And yet, COP28 in Dubai last year was the first COP to include a day dedicated to health. And I would like to appreciate the leadership of the United Arab Emirates on this. The causes of this crisis are multi-sectoral. So too are its impacts, and so too must be our response. Collectively, we got ourselves into this mess. Collectively, we must get ourselves out of it. No single country and no single agency can do this alone. That's why the work of the quadripartite is so important. Together, we recently launched the implementation guide of the One Health Joint Plan of Action to support countries to design, implement, and operationalize a One Health approach. One Health is one of the important issues that WHO member states are now discussing as part of their negotiation of the new pandemic agreement ahead of the World Health Assembly in just 12 weeks' time. I urge you all to voice your support for the agreement. Your work this week will have a direct bearing on the realization of a One Health approach. And I welcome the 6 areas Executive Director Inge has outlined in her report in which countries can take more effective, inclusive, and sustainable multilateral action. In particular, the resolutions on air quality and chemicals, waste, and preventing pollution are important for driving sustained multi-sectoral action to protect the health of people and planet. We would also like to see health reflected strongly in the new agreement on ending plastic pollution. In this and many other areas, WHO remains committed to supporting all countries with evidence-based technical tools, including our air quality guidelines, the Global Framework on Chemicals, and the WHO Chemicals Roadmap. Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends, the patient is in peril, and the patient is our planet. Band-aid solutions will not do. We need transformative action. We must transform our energy and transport systems, our food systems, our health systems, and we must transform, especially ourselves, to break out of siloed mindsets and work for effective, inclusive, and sustainable multilateral action, because we have no other choice. For everything that makes us different, we're one species, sharing the same DNA and the same planet. We have no future but a common future. I thank you. Asante sana. And finally, I would like to take the opportunity to appreciate President Ruto's leadership and commitment to universal health coverage, and also for hosting UNEP, one of our excellent agencies, and also for hosting this assembly. Asante sana, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, dear Dr. Tedros and the Director General of the World Health Organization for this statement. And I think one sentence will resonate with us for the next couple of days. The physician treats, nature heals. Thank you. The Assembly will now hear statements by heads of states and governments. I now have the absolute honor to invite His Excellency William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya and Commander-in-Chief of the Kenyan Defense Forces, to address the Environment Assembly.
Thank you very much, Madam Leila. Your Excellency, Madam Leila Ben-Ali, President of UNEA 6. Your Excellency, Paula Naves, President of Economic and Social Council of the United Nations. Your Excellency, Abiy Ahmed Ali, Prime Minister of Ethiopia, and my guest who is on a state visit to Kenya. Your Excellency, President Hassan Sheikh, President of Somalia. Your Excellency, President Eric Mokwetsi Masisi, President of Botswana. Your Excellency, President Ismail Gele, President of Djibouti. Your Excellency, President Brice Oligui, President of Gabon. Excellencies, Vice Presidents, Prime Ministers, Heads of State, Honorable Ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Kenya. During the third Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee, which was held here in Nairobi last November to develop a global plastic treaty, I promised in this very hall to abolish visa requirements for anyone coming to Kenya. I want to announce here that we did exactly that. And we did it for a couple of reasons. Number one, because Kenya hosts the only UN headquarters in the Global South, the largest UN headquarters in the world, and also that Kenya is the home of humanity. And therefore, to require anybody to get a visa while going home is not fair. And that is why I take this opportunity to welcome all of you home. Welcome home. The sixth session of the United Nations Environmental Assembly, UNEA 6, convenes under the theme that aptly captures the essence of what we need to achieve. Given the magnitude and the urgency of the existential crisis that humanity and life on our planet is grappling with, only collective action at the multilateral level that is effective, inclusive, and sustainable will enable international community to tackle climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. Fortunately, we are now aligned in terms of the need to move together rapidly in order to catch up with and overtake this crisis. We are propelled by the momentum of the 2023 COP28, which took place in Dubai last November and concluded on a hopeful note with a number of historical decisions. First, COP28 emphasized that simultaneously transitioning away from fossil fuels while tripling renewables and doubling efficiency is a collective priority. Second, it positions resilience and adaptation at the center of climate action, clearly defining the limits connecting nature, health, agriculture, and food system chains, as well as peace and security. If there was ever any doubt, COP28 confirmed that climate change is no longer to be seen as an abstract concern residing in distant future, but a real and present danger that requires urgent collective action from all of us. This distinguished assembly, UNEA 6, is the first intergovernmental global meeting after COP28. This places upon this assembly a tremendous responsibility to expeditiously deliver on its agenda in full and thereby demonstrate the power of international cooperation and effective multilateralism. This is a challenging task, which is complicated by the fact that nations of the world are also grappling with a dynamic complex of interconnected and multifaceted threats, risks, uncertainties, and shocks, ranging from a sluggish economic growth, conflict and wars, and geopolitical fragmentation. This situation is exacerbated by an alarming climate change trend, whose implications are now impossible to ignore. Record-breaking temperatures on one hand, catastrophic droughts and floods, escalating sea levels, landslides, rampant wildfires. If anybody watched TV last night, we were witnessing huge wildfires in the US, severe cyclones which have become frequent and familiar in many regions worldwide. Science is unequivocal that human activity are the primary catalyst for this phenomena. Consequently, as humankind, we are faced with a critical decision to radically alter our course or persist on the current path, endangering our very existence. Undoubtedly, we collectively appreciate this predicament, yet our track record on course correcting is mixed. On one hand, undeniable progress has been made on several fronts. At COP28, we operationalized the Loss and Damage Fund to support economic and non-economic losses and damages associated with adverse effects of climate change in climate-vulnerable developing nations. At the same time, the adoption of the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework was pivotal in defining the actions that must be taken under and within this decade in order to curb biodiversity loss by 2030 and set the planet on a path of restoration and recovery. I welcome the progress being made in the ongoing negotiations for a legally binding global agreement aimed at ending plastic pollution, including its detrimental impacts on marine environment, because it brings us closer to mitigating humanity's collective vulnerability to a monumental crisis. These highlights outline the various positive developments and are an eloquent statement to the collective determination and strategic foresight which now inspired our multilateral endeavors. On the other hand, it is important to point out that incremental steps are no longer sufficient in the face of rapidly escalating threats. We are off track and off target when it comes to fulfilling critical parameters on many indicators of action and delivery. Despite increased awareness and efforts, global greenhouse gas emissions are still on the rise. Pollution patterns are veering in an alarming direction, and biodiversity is confronted with multifaceted and escalating threats along with the risk of an accelerating rate of loss. No economy, community, or nation can tackle these challenges single-handedly with any hope of success. Nevertheless, for all of us, all the work must begin at home with effective domestic measures. Kenya, the government of Kenya has instituted a comprehensive institutional framework to anchor decisive interventions across numerous sectors, including energy and pollution, forest conservation, and critical landscape restoration, agriculture and food systems, as well as nature and biodiversity. The aim is to proactively reverse the impact of climate change and promote the resilience of our people and our economy. I invite you to find time and visit some of the projects in Kenya to witness the passion, the commitment, determination, and ingenuity of our people and what they bring to these endeavors. The understanding that the people are invested in climate action agenda and that our policies and strategies must make space for their effective participation has inspired the emergence of a bottom-up climate action paradigm in Kenya, complementing our bottom-up economic transformation agenda. I take this opportunity to express gratitude and appreciation to all our partners, led by the leadership of the UN system, for supporting us in driving this agenda. I also invite you to mobilize your national leaderships as well as the leadership of various institutions in your countries to partner with us in order to develop a broad coalition for effective action. Partnerships are the key to our collective success. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, our present highly challenging circumstances demand transformative global cooperation as a matter of great urgency. From experience, we know that the existing multilateral system is not up to the task. It is imperative for us to confront this truth with honesty and rectify glaring deficiencies which impede effective multilateralism. Our reform agenda must begin by attending to fundamental structural dimensions to realign multilateral institutions with core values of the international community, including sovereign equality and effective democratic representation as the basis of enhanced effective and inclusivity. If we fail in this critical endeavor, multilateralism in its present state might falter, struggle, and collapse in the face of dire global crisis, overwhelmed by pervasive distrust, skepticism, and disengagement. The time has come for us to find and apply the levers of transformational change in order to address multiple priorities simultaneously. Last September, Kenya and the Africa Union Commission convened the first Africa Climate Summit here in Nairobi. The summit culminated in the Nairobi Declaration on Climate Change and Call to Action, which set out our vision as Africans for climate-positive economic growth and development on our continent. The summit recognized that our continent has the fundamentals to spearhead progress along a path compatible with effective climate action by serving as a cost-competitive industrial hub with a capacity to support other regions in achieving their net zero ambitions. It also called for the urgent reform of the global financial architecture to rectify its current deficiencies and modernize the entire system to meet the development needs of the majority in the 21st century. African countries and many other developing countries pay significantly higher costs, up to 5 times more than others, for our debt. Those seeking investments in private projects face high costs of capital driven by real and imaginary risks. This arbitrary, unjust, discriminatory, and unequal state of affairs is untenable given the pressure of time, limited resources, and the imperative to actualize a fairer and more inclusive development and responsive global governance. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, international collaboration is crucial in promoting the adoption of the reduce, reuse, and recycle life cycle approaches to waste that are vital for sustaining the blue economy and its ecosystems. Kenya's response to ban single-use plastic has proved effective. To build on this progress, we are implementing the Green Economy Strategy and Implementation Plan to shift waste management to a circular economy. I urge the global community to advance towards a climate-neutral, resource-efficient, and circular economy. We commend United Nations Environmental Programme, UNEP, for its role in the intergovernmental negotiations for the Global Plastic Treaty. Building on this achievement, and in line with promoting efficiency and effectiveness, I urge the global community to support Africa's position that the Secretariat of the treaty be headquartered here in UNEP. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I have reasons for it. The current global environmental governance remains fragmented despite the historic agreement at the Rio +20 conference, which calls for the consolidation of headquarters functions in Nairobi. This governance fragmentation leads to policy inconsistencies, overlaps, inefficiencies, and wastage in the administration and implementation of multilateral environment agreement. Addressing environmental issues in this manner diminishes efficiency and effectiveness, undermining our ability to make meaningful change. Therefore, UNEP, as the global body with a mandate to set the environmental agenda, must enhance policy coordination, integration, and coherent implementation of the agreements while honoring each mandate. Likewise, UNEP should provide regular and robust platforms for exchange of information, knowledge, best practices, and lessons learned among multilateral environmental agreements and stakeholders, fostering consensus and enhancing the science-policy connection. With these important mandates in mind, I note with concern that financing from the UN regular budget and voluntary funds remain insufficient for UNEP to effectively deliver. And I am happy Dennis Francis is here with us, that you will consider at the UN General Assembly the requests that have been made by UNEP on modernizing the facilities here. We are very proud that this compound where we are today is the largest UN compound on Earth. Here, we have 140 acres donated by the people of Kenya because we believe in what UNEP is doing. We would expect a lot of support from the rest of the UN community to make this facility a truly environmental headquarters of the globe. I therefore urge the UN General Assembly to secure new, substantial, and reliable funding from its regular budget to provide consistent and sustainable support for UNEP's crucial work. Additionally, I appeal to donors to increase their voluntary contributions, recognizing the urgent and vast scope of current environmental challenges. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we have 6 years left to deliver on the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Unless we collectively undertake radical positive action, we are on course to fail. The obligation falls on each one of us to clearly identify their role in order to define our contribution to this collective endeavor. Each of us must challenge ourselves and one another to unleash and harness our collective creativity and solidarity. May the decisions and the discussions and engagements in these sessions mark a significant leap forward in this vital goal. As I conclude, I have been informed by the chair that most of the meetings have taken very long, sometimes ending at 2 a.m. in the morning, sometimes at midnight. You have done a very good job, and you deserve some holiday after this meeting. I just want to give you some hints on where to find a place to enjoy your time after this very committed service to humanity. One is that about 10 or 15 minutes from your hotel room is Nairobi National Park. You can visit Nairobi National Park. I, however, want to warn you that we have a fence around the Nairobi National Park, but sometimes the lions break out. So in the event that you meet a lion on the streets, please be careful. They are wild. Let me give you another hint that if you thought it's only humans who elect members of parliament and have a legislative body, I invite you to go to Naivasha, and you will find a phenomenon called the baboon parliament, where baboons meet regularly at a particular place, at a particular time, and they discuss their legislative issues. And if you have a bit more time, you may want to go to Masai Mara, where we have the wildebeest migration. And this migration is much more orderly than the human migration. They know how to cross borders, and they know how to move without causing any environmental damage. And if you have a bit more time, please travel to Lamu, and you will have an opportunity to watch the swimming lions there. And finally, you may want to watch another migration called the whales migration in a place called Tana River. So, you have ideas on what to do after this conference, and I wish you very fruitful deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. President of the Republic of Kenya, for this statement, and also for the holiday hints in Kenya. I'm sure this assembly will need a lot of that. Please allow me to take this opportunity to extend, on behalf of all delegations, our sincere appreciation to the people and the government of Kenya for their hospitality and for being champions for the environment. I now have the honor to invite His Excellency Mogwitsi Eric Masisi, President of the Republic of Botswana, to address the Assembly.
Your Excellency, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, Your Excellencies, colleague heads of state and government here present, Your Excellency, President of the 78th General Assembly, President of the United Nations Environment Assembly, President of ECOSOC, Executive Director of UNEP, the Director General of WHO, Deputy Executive Director of UNEP, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all. I wish from the outset to extend my gratitude to His Excellency William Samoei Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, for inviting me to this auspicious summit and for the gracious hospitality extended to me and my delegation since our arrival in this green city of Nairobi. We are convened here in the beautiful city of Nairobi to collectively address the critical environmental challenges facing Mother Earth today, with a view to creating a coherent system of international environmental governance. The importance of a healthy planet for human progress and prosperity is highlighted in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This global concern is underscored by a sharp awareness of our degraded planet as a result of the three planetary crises of climate change, nature and biodiversity loss, pollution and waste, as well as other global environmental challenges. The net effect of these problems and challenges is that they pose limits on the attainment of the desired and most optimum levels of human well-being and prosperity, thus creating obstacles to a better future for all of us, now and for our posterity. Madam President, only through collaborative action can we hope to safeguard the diversity of life on Earth and secure a sustainable future for generations to come. The urgency of this task calls for global cooperation and commitment to ensure the resilience and well-being of our precious planet. Similar to many countries worldwide, Botswana is not immune to prevalent global environmental challenges. These challenges are largely linked to various factors, including socioeconomic development evidenced by the expansion of the industrial sector, mining activities, commercial centers, and the ongoing urbanization within the country. They are also coupled with shifting lifestyle patterns and consumer habits, which serve as significant driving forces for environmental degradation, most typically being littering. Madam President, I must hasten to add that in responding to the global call for action on planetary survival, Botswana has taken steps in the right direction. In this regard, we are making significant strides towards transitioning from coal-fired plants for generating electricity to embracing alternative renewable energy sources. As part of implementing the energy policy and renewable energy strategy, my government has made the decision to increase renewable energy penetration from 2% to 30% by 2030. This will be achieved through the implementation of solar photovoltaic, concentrated solar plants, and wind energy projects, and will double the nationally determined contributions target to show raised ambition. Madam President, in 2021, the Government of the Republic of Botswana approved the Integrated Waste Management Policy with calls for a paradigm shift from the linear to circular economy concept, which promotes waste recovery, reuse, and recycle. By turning waste into an economic good, we will not only be addressing environmental challenges, but also socio-economic factors through job creation and income generation for the communities, thereby allowing nature to recover. Furthermore, Botswana is reinforcing its commitment to a circular economy by developing the waste management value chain roadmap to enhance the understanding of the circular economy concept and business opportunities in the waste value chains. This necessarily entails investing in waste recovery, recycling, and the reuse infrastructure and awareness outreach campaigns to promote proper waste disposal and recycling practices nationwide. Madam President, pollution is a serious matter that does not only threaten the environment, but is also a threat to both human and animal health because of the interconnection of ecosystems that are habitats to people and to animals. As a country, we are cognizant of this issue, and some of the work we have done include the development of a strategy for management of electronic waste and working with the Dental Association of Botswana on the elimination of mercury in dental amalgam. The elimination of mercury is in line with the Minamata Convention in recognition of the pollution threat that the chemical poses for the environment. Madam President, I'm also proud to emphasize that 40% of Botswana's land area is dedicated to conservation. This commitment underscores our nation's dedication to preserving biodiversity, ensuring the conservation of vital ecosystems, and contributing to global efforts to safeguard our natural heritage. And that is why it's no accident that you find the largest herd of elephants in the world in the wild, in Botswana. Botswana, like many other developing countries, requires significant financial resources to build climate resilience, mitigate the impacts of climate change, and transition to a low-carbon economy. In a quest to bridge the biodiversity finance gap, one of the commercial banks in Botswana has launched the first ever sustainable bond in the Botswana Stock Exchange, amounting to about $3.6 million. This private sector initiative will go a long way in supporting sustainable development and growth. Madam President, recognizing the efforts that Botswana has done and is continuously undertaking, it is in this context that Botswana pleads with developed countries to fulfill their financial pledges under the Climate Change Convention so that developing countries like yours and mine can access the funds and vigorously implement projects that enable sustainable development for planet Earth. During COP28, held in the United Arab Emirates in December 2023, we adopted the Loss and Damage Fund, and pledges have already been made by various countries. I urge those countries to honor their pledges in order to assist those greatly affected by climate change to assess and the much-needed resources for adaptation. Botswana and other Southern African countries are experiencing prolonged periods of drought and extreme temperatures that will surely have negative impact on the food security of our countries. Therefore, action is needed now. Excellencies, in my capacity as the chair of the Global Water Changemakers, we launched a high-level panel on water investments for Africa plan on the 2nd December 2023 during COP28, which aims to assist countries to mobilize at least $30 billion annually by 2030 for the achievement of water-related SDG targets on the continent. The Water Investment for Africa Plan proposes to mobilize at least 30% of the $30 billion from institutional investors, pension funds, and innovative finance. This campaign aims to close the water investment gap in Africa for the achievement of the water-related SDG targets. In this respect, I encourage the private sector to play its part in supporting the efforts made at addressing water and sanitation challenges throughout Africa. Mr. President, Madam President, rather, another string to my climate action bow is that I am also the Africa Climate Mobility Champion. This initiative seeks to generate data and analysis, as well as mobilizing political support for locally anchored solutions to anticipate and address climate mobility. Excellencies, distinguished guests, last but not least in importance, in my capacity as the global chair of the group of landlocked developing countries, LLDCs, it will be remiss of me if I don't seize this opportunity to urge the deliberations to also give eminence to the countries with special situations that bear the most pressure as a result of the three planetary crises of climate change, nature and biodiversity loss, pollution and waste, such as the landlocked developing countries, the least developed countries, and small island developing states. These nations are not just vulnerable, they are also left behind. They need support to uplift their people, create jobs, and foster sustainable growth. Therefore, I urge all of us in the similar spirit to stand in solidarity with the LLDC's agenda through an reinvigorated global partnership and support for the group. I hope to meet you in Kigali this June as we adopt a new ambitious and forward-looking program of action for the next decade. In conclusion, Madam President, let us collectively ensure that the legacy of responsible environmental practices transcends borders, leaving a permanent mark on the well-being of our planet. Through shared responsibility and collaborative actions, we can strive to create a sustainable legacy for generations to come. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the President of Botswana for his statements. I now have the honor to invite His Excellency Ismail Omar Gele, President of the Republic of Djibouti, to address the Assembly.
Madam President, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and government, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. Now, first of all, I should like to thank President Ruto and indeed the Kenyan people for the warm welcome extended to my delegation since our arrival here in this beautiful city of Nairobi. Secondly, I should like to extend my warmest congratulations to the newly elected president of the conference. I should also like to thank the UN Environment Secretariat for their tireless efforts in ensuring that our meetings run smoothly. Our world is facing many environmental challenges, including climate change, the loss of the natural environment and biodiversity, and pollution, without, of course, forgetting desertification, land and soil degradation, drought, and deforestation. There's no need to repeat here that the greatest threat, quite clearly, is climate change. The causes of global warming are well known. They're constantly mentioned in our forums. They have been scientifically explained and indeed scientifically proven. Now, in the face of the climate crisis, inaction is not an option, as it destroys the credibility and solidity of multilateralism and the international system. As I said, it destroys the credibility and solidity of multilateralism and the international system. And in fact, after a great many agreements and commitments, multilateral financing remains below our increasing needs for adaptation and mitigation in the face of climate change. We must act now, boldly, with a sense of determination, if we are to mitigate the effects of climate change and forge a sustainable future for all. Despite our very marginal contribution to global warming, Djibouti is resolutely committed to low-carbon development by investing in solar, wind, and geothermal energy projects. We have also set up an electricity interconnection with Ethiopia to import hydroelectricity. We've also created a regional observatory on climate change. The second challenge facing the world, Madam President, is that of the loss of biodiversity. Biodiversity is much more than just a collection of living species. It is the very foundation of our existence. From lush forests to vast oceans, every ecosystem is home to a diversity of interconnected living beings and creatures, all of them playing a vital role in maintaining the environmental and ecological balance. Irresponsible human activities, such as deforestation, uncontrolled urbanization, pollution, and excessive exploitation of our natural resources are compromising the very integrity of our ecosystems and jeopardizing the very survival of a great many species. We are witnessing the devastating consequences of this destruction, the accelerated disappearance of animal and plant species, the degradation of natural habitats, as well as the increasing disruption of ecological and environmental cycles. To this end, Djibouti has adopted a substantial legal arsenal. We've also created several protected areas. And of course, we have carried out reforestation initiatives. The mobilization of international financial resources is essential for sustainable action in favor of biodiversity. And finally, plastic pollution. Plastic pollution, which now affects all of the world's oceans, threatening the marine ecosystems that are so essential for the development of fishing and tourism. This scourge is on such a scale that only a global effort can solve this problem. In this respect, we cherish the hope that an international agreement on plastics will soon be adopted. The consequences of these environmental challenges are being felt far and wide, with irreversible impacts for both humans and animals. These challenges not only jeopardize hard-won development progress, particularly in Africa, but they also hamper our global initiatives, those aimed at achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. By way of conclusion, it is important to preserve and indeed to strengthen multilateralism in order to meet the various challenges we face. No single nation can solve global problems all on its own. Only a reformed and strengthened multilateralism will be in a position to meet the challenges facing humanity. And it is for just this reason that we hope that this sixth session of the United Nations Environment Assembly will adopt decisions that will strengthen multilateralism in the environmental field. Distinguished guests, I thank you.
Voilà. Merci bien.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you so much, Mr. President of the Republic of Djibouti, for your address.
His Excellency Brice Oligui Nguema, President of the Transition Head of the State of the Gabonese Republic, to address the Assembly.
Excellence. Your Excellency, Mr. President of the Republic of Kenya. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and government. Your Excellency, the Secretary General or the President of the United Nations General Assembly. Madam President of the 6th United Nations Environment Assembly. Madam Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, honorable delegates, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. In addressing this august assembly, it would be remiss of me if I did not fulfill the very pleasant duty of conveying my gratitude to His Excellency President William Ruto, whose political vision and commitment to this common quest for a better home for humanity, I praise. I also, of course, extend this gratitude to the Kenyan people for the fraternal warmth of the welcome extended to the Gabonese delegation. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, humanity is facing a triple environmental crisis, to which we need to come up with strong collective responses. The challenges of climate change, biodiversity, and pollution, especially by plastics, are undoubtedly serious threats to the well-being of our populations and the achievement of sustainable development. I am therefore pleased to confirm the commitment of my country, Gabon, to the fight against single-use plastic pollution. Single-use plastic pollution, which has a particularly pronounced impact on soil, oceans, and the climate. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. For more than 5 decades now, Gabon has been committed to coming up with a virtuous development model, as illustrated so tellingly by the following major milestones: the creation of a Ministry of the Environment following the 1972 United Nations Conference on the Environment, the adoption in 1993 of the first environmental protection law, just 1 year after the 1992 Earth Conference in Rio de Janeiro. We have the creation of 13 national parks covering 11% of the country in 2002 at the Rio +10 summit. The creation in 2017 of a network of 20 marine parks and marine reserves covering 26% of Gabon's territorial waters and covering an area of 53,000 square kilometers. On the strength of all of the above, Gabon has achieved significant results, with a forest cover of 88% and 27% of its maritime territory now protected. To this, we can add a positive carbon footprint of over 100 million net tons of CO2 sequestered each year, and the largest population of forest elephants in Africa. Speaking of elephants, the Gabonese government has been providing them with absolute protection for decades now, and will continue to do so. Nevertheless, Elephants are today a real socio-political and economic problem in my country, as they are the main actors in the human-wildlife conflicts. In fact, during 2023, we were forced to deplore enormous damage done to the crops of Gabonese farmers, and especially the loss of half a dozen lives. These tragedies impose a high social, political, and economic cost on the Gabonese state. And so, I repeat here, we will continue to assume our environmental commitments, but not at the expense of the well-being of our population, nor act just to please those who are quicker to condemn than to support our states in implementing these mechanisms in a more consistent fashion. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, clearly, the selfish, predatory attitude adopted vis-à-vis nature since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution is now turning against both man and the environment. So our resolutions cannot continue to be ones of variable geometry. We cannot leave some aside while we protect the comforts of others. We require more justice, more fairness in global environmental governance. We need to create the preconditions for an economic valuation of our natural capital, and we need to demonstrate solidarity in the face of the imperative need that is Africa's development. I would therefore here like to voice my determination to see our work result in firm resolutions, ones likely to safeguard our planet. This is why I should like to seize this opportunity to call for fairer global action in response to these three crises. Let's not wait passively for a litany of misfortunes and a sea of troubles. Let us mobilize to face the challenges threatening mankind together. Distinguished guests, I thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you so much, Mr. President of the Republic of Gabon, for your address.
To invite His Excellency Hassan Sheikh Mohammed, President of the Federal Republic of Somalia, to address the Assembly.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, all protocols are observed. It's an honor and privilege to address this sixth session of the UN Assembly, sixth session of the UN Environmental Assembly in Nairobi today. From the outset, I want to express my gratitude to the Kenyan government and the people and the government and the people of Kenya for their warm welcome and hospitality and successful facilitation of this vital UNEA 6 Assembly. Equally, I recognize the great effort of the period of UNEA 6 in ensuring the success of this Assembly over the last 2 years under the leadership of the brotherly Kingdom of Morocco. I say thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, climate change is an existential threat which we must all face together or perish as a human race together. Therefore, the UNEA 6 theme of effective, inclusive, and sustainable multilateral action to take climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution could not be timelier and more relevant across the world. We are witnessing rising temperatures, more droughts, floods, melting ice caps, and the disruption of a human life in every continent. We cannot go on like this forever.
whether it's the food insecurity facing hundreds of millions of people, rising pollution-related chronic illness, destroyed homes and livelihoods in the most climate vulnerable communities in developing states, or the rapid pace for global urbanization. The only realistic way to address them all is through effective, inclusive, and sustainable multilateral action to tackle climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. In Somalia, we are on the front line of the climate change, and our government is working tirelessly to address the enormous challenges we face in mitigating, adapting to the new painful reality we're facing today. As a country, we are witnessing rising temperature and have just come out of a 4-year drought with a climate-induced humanitarian situation still stubbornly persisting. Looking forward, it's predicted that extreme weather events like droughts and floods will increase, having disproportionate impact on our people's lives, livelihoods, infrastructure, land degradation, biodiversity loss, and food insecurity. Accordingly, for us in Somalia, I would strongly argue that we have passed the point of climate crisis and we are now in the climate emergency stage. Given this agonizing reality, we need the support of all our international partners to take immediate action to address this effectively and quickly. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad to inform you that having established Somalia's first Minister of Environment and Climate Change in the year 2022, our government is in the process of finalizing the remaining few policy and legal frameworks to safeguard our environment. Key among these is the new Environmental Protection and Management Law, which our government ratified only last week. This legislation is fundamental in informing our environmental responses to the existential challenges we face at this critical time in a determined and systematic manner, including biodiversity loss and pollution address. Furthermore, we are banning the importation, trade, and use of plastic bags from the end of June this year. This is certainly a game-changing action which will protect our people and environment from plastic pollution. Effective, inclusive, and sustainable multilateral actions to tackle climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution must include sincere action on climate financing without available, accessible, and affordable financing. Most of the developing states like Somalia cannot meet their vast and most pressing adaptation mitigation requirements and priorities. Our national determined contribution reflects our commitment to addressing climate change through a comprehensive framework that prioritizes both mitigation and adaptation strategies. The total cost of implementing these strategies is estimated to be more than $15 billion through 2030, which underscores the scale of investment required to meet the targets set by Somalia. To meet our adaptation and mitigation targets, this is more than we raise in domestic revenue or are able to borrow from vertical and multilateral funds or the private financing markets. Given the difficulty for access to climate financing, the international climate financing architecture is not serving our needs at the moment and is not fit for the purpose at the moment as well. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, there is a huge mismatch between available climate financing and the emergency situation most of the world's affected states, especially fragile countries like Somalia, are in. Accordingly, there must be equity in global access and resource mobilization to ensure that all nations are able to respond to their climate crisis equally for the benefit of humanity. Additionally, there must be a burden sharing between the developed and the developing world in this matter. In the spirit of multilateralism and common development to achieve sustainable development even beyond the 2030 UN aspiration. Better managed and protecting Somalia's environment, as our government is committed to, will ensure that our vast natural resources, including our oceans, fertile lands, and livestock, can translate to green energy, jobs, and growth for the benefit of our people and the wider Horn of Africa region. We are currently working on a bankable and investment-ready projects to attract climate financing and investors, and are hopeful that this will help our government raise more domestic resources to effectively finance our national mitigation and adaptation needs on a permanent basis in line with our national climate financing strategy. Before I conclude, I would like to stress here that Somalia facing multi-challenges: the war against terror, the poverty line, below the poverty line, most of our population are refined, post-conflict environment, the fragility situation. This has compounded the effects of environmental challenges. Somalia faced four consecutive years of drought, and the fifth year was the El Nino and the floods that destroyed whatever remaining after the droughts. In conclusion, I'm confident that we, as a community of nations, are aware to existential threat that climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution poses to our very existence. This destructive evidence is all around us. However, we are still lagging behind, and when it comes to taking effective, inclusive, and sustainable multilateral actions to tackle them, where it be accessing climate financing, knowledge sharing, cooperation on specific international climate protection measures, like banning plastic bags and systematically punishing those that dump chemical waste in our oceans. We need to be more united, and community nations and international institutions more than ever before. Our collective survival depends on this. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President of the Federal Republic of Somalia, for your statements. We finished now the statements of presidents, and we are moving to the statements of vice presidents and prime ministers. I have now the honor to invite His Excellency Musa Al-Quni, Vice President of the Presidential Council of the State of Libya, for his statement.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فخامة السيد ويليام.
Excellencies, Excellency Mr. Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, Mr. Antonio Guterres, who addressed us via video, Madam Benali, President of UNEA 6, President of the General Assembly of the United Nations, President of ECOSOC, Madam Inga Anderson, Executive Director of UNEP, ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, distinguished guests, President of the Republic of Kenya, Mr. Ruto, Madam President of UNEA 6, I would like to thank you very much for all of your efforts as President of this current session. Your efforts have allowed us, without any doubt, to achieve a great number of important issues. It's my honor to address this august assembly, an important one on climate change, on biodiversity loss, on pollution. These are three crises for the world and for Africa in particular, and to discuss a number of draft resolutions which will no doubt have their impact on the environment, on our economy across the continent and globally. We form the wish to set in place mechanisms which will allow us to benefit to the very best from the opportunities to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, Libya, like many countries in Africa, is facing many challenges because of climate change, but also due to natural disasters in the city of Tana and other cities on the Libyan coast. This natural disaster has caused thousands of victims, injured people, those who have disappeared, and has affected infrastructure in the region. And since we are all facing these challenges, which are so gigantic and which are becoming more and more complex over time, given these challenges that we have to face jointly with decisions that we are taking in a consensual manner to guarantee sustainability of our resources, Libya understands perfectly the impact of the rise in temperature the world is facing, and Libya understands perfectly as well the issues relating to water resources, and this is why we have decided to take a certain number of resolutions to respond to these challenges. We are going to strengthen the amount of investment in technology and in capacity building for the environment, as well as technology transfer for water management, particularly where it relates to sustainability of such resources. Libya has always encouraged international and regional cooperation because it's within these international fora that we can come to realizing our commitments in the context of our responsibilities as set out in the Paris Accord, as well as our partnerships, and make them effective across the African continent, as well as with our international partners, so that we can ensure adaptation which is global, equitable, and efficacious. From here on forwards, we must commit ourselves once again that industrialized states, and we would like to highlight the importance of the active and financial contributions of developed countries to assist developing countries to adapt to climate change and to right the inequitable resources that exist across developed and developing countries, to provide the resources for the commitments made in Dubai for an international fund for loss and damage. In conclusion, Libya remains with you and to participate in the building of a better future, as we are doing here in UNEA and elsewhere throughout the world. Wherever possible, we work towards the exchange of experience, of expertise, particularly in the context of climate change and mitigation, so that we can ensure the best results for future generations. We call upon all participating parties to this session of UNEA 6 to work in unity together and to achieve solutions, results, which meet the requirements for us to achieve our common objectives, which are dear to us. We also have the hope that we will be able to conserve the beauty and magnificence on our planet. Thank you.
شكرا مشكور معالي.
I would like to thank the Vice President of the Council of the Presidency of Libya.
Vice President of the Republic of Zimbabwe to address the Assembly.
Your Excellency, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, President of Kenya, Excellencies, Head of State and Government, Prime Ministers and other heads of state and government, Honorable Vice Presidents, Your Excellency, President of the General Assembly, the President of the 6th session of the United Nations Environmental Assembly, Your Excellency, Ms. Leila Benal, Honorable Ministers, the Executive Director of UNEP, Ms. Inga Anderson, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. I bring cordial and fraternal greetings from the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, His Excellency Dr. Emmerson Mnangagwa, who would have loved to attend this august event, but could not do so due to pressing prior commitments. Please allow me to express our sincere gratitude to His Excellency Dr. William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, for the invitation to this high-level segment and to the Republic of Kenya. And thank the Republic of Kenya through their President for the excellent hospitality extended to our delegation since the commencement of the 6th session of the United Nations Environmental Assembly. I also wish to recognize and congratulate the President of UNEA 6, Her Excellency Leila Benal, for her astute leadership during this session. Your Excellencies, our generation is facing formidable environmental challenges since the turn of the century. We are gathered here to address the critical environmental challenges we face and to present our commitment to sustainable development at this 60th session of the United Nations Environmental Assembly, running under the theme, and I quote, effective, inclusive, sustainable multilateral actions to tackle climate change, biodiversity and loss pollution. Zimbabwe recognized the importance of environmental conservation and sustainable practices in achieving the goals of the 2030 Agenda for the Sustainable Development, which dovetails with our own nation's vision of 2030 towards a prosperous and empowered upper middle-income society by the year 2030. We acknowledge that environmental degradation poses a significant threat to our nation's economic, social, and ecological well-being. We therefore are dedicated and determined to implement plans and policies and strategies that promote sustainable development. I would like to begin by highlighting our efforts in addressing climate change. Zimbabwe is committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions at a target of 40% per capita emissions reduction across all sectors of the economy by the year 2030, and transitioning towards a low-carbon economy by the year 2030. We have developed a comprehensive national climate change response strategy that focuses on mitigation, adaptation, and resilience building measures. We are actively promoting renewable energy sources such as solar and wind power, and implementing energy efficiency initiatives to reduce the carbon footprint. Your Excellencies, Zimbabwe is blessed with rich biodiversity, including unique ecosystems and abundant wildlife. To safeguard this natural heritage, we have established an extensive network of national parks and protected areas. We are strengthening law enforcement to combat wildlife tracking, wetlands invasion and distortion, and implementing community-based conservation programs to ensure sustainable livelihoods for local communities, while at the same time preserving biodiversity. The government of Zimbabwe has developed policy and strategic documents on the sustainable management of wetlands in an effort to complement the existing legal framework. These are National Wetlands Master Plan and policy guidelines. Moreover, Zimbabwe gazetted certain wetlands as ecologically sensitive areas to further protect them. We are deeply committed to sustainable land management, and to that end, we are implementing programs to promote sustainable agriculture, including agroforestry and conservation farming techniques, such as Pumbuza and other programs. We are also working towards the restoration of degraded land and protection of our valuable forests. Ladies and gentlemen, in addition to these efforts, Zimbabwe recognizes the significance of water resource management. We are committed to ensuring access to clean water and sanitation for all our citizens. We are investing in infrastructure development, water treatment facilities, and other conservation programs to address water scarcity challenges. We are also promoting sustainable water use practices in agriculture, industry, and domestic sectors. Zimbabwe also recognizes the critical role of environment education awareness. We are actively promoting environmental education and awareness. We are actively promoting environmental literacy among our citizens, especially the youth. We are integrating environmental education into the national curriculum and organizing awareness campaigns to foster a culture of environmental responsibility and sustainable practices. Your Excellencies, Zimbabwe will be hosting the 15th Conference of Parties to the Conservation on Wetlands, also known as Ramsar Convention, from the 23rd to the 31st of July in the year 2025. You are all invited to Zimbabwe to attend this momentous event and witness the wetland restoration efforts by Zimbabwe. In conclusion, Your Excellencies, Zimbabwe reaffirms its commitment to environmental conservation and sustainable development. We recognize that achieving these objectives requires collaboration and support from international community. We are determined to work closely with other nations, civil society organizations, and the multilateral institutions to address global environmental challenges collectively. I thank you.
Thank you to the Vice President of the Republic of Zimbabwe for his statement, and I have now the honor to invite His Excellency Gervais Ndirakobuka, Prime Minister of the Republic of Burundi, to address the Assembly.
Excellences, Monsieur le Président.
President of the Republic of Kenya, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and government, Excellency Madam President of UNEA 6, Excellency Executive Director of the United Nations Programme for the Environment, ladies and gentlemen ministers, ladies and gentlemen heads of delegation, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, all protocols observed. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to address the 6th session of the United Nations Environment Assembly. Allow me to extend my sincere greetings and my gratitude to the government and the people of Kenya for the warm welcome and kind hospitality extended to us since our arrival on these shores. Burundi has just outlined its vision of a country emerging by 2040 and to become a developed country by 2060. In this vision, Burundi promotes a peaceful country where everyone lives in decent conditions and no one dies of avoidable causes, with a competitive economy driven by high value-added agri-food and industrial sectors, and by mining for the benefit of all society, all within a clean and well-preserved natural environment. Burundi's participation in the 6th session of the United Nations Environment Assembly takes place against this backdrop. And the themes around which this session is oriented are of comfort for Burundi, since they address the same concerns that will be addressed by Burundi itself as part of its growth dynamic, in line with its vision of restoring harmony between nature and humanity by improving the living conditions of the most vulnerable strata of its population. Burundi is suffering greatly from the effects of climate change, which are having a negative effect on national production, on infrastructure, and on the degradation of terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems. Given these conditions, the objective of making Burundi a prosperous nation through a sustained increase in the production of goods and services and structural changes leading to higher life expectation, expectancy, the satisfaction of basic needs, the reduction of inequalities and of unemployment and poverty in all its facets and dimensions would be compromised. August Assembly. Over the last 2 decades, Burundi has actively backed international decisions taken under multilateral conventions on biodiversity, climate, and desertification. By way of example, to curb the loss of nature and biodiversity, Burundi has made bold, ambitious commitments in the field of landscape restoration. As part of the Bonn challenges, 2 million hectares indeed, and a national reforestation program called Ewe Burundi Orambaye has been set up with the aim of planting 5 million trees every year, and this since 2018. Bold commitments within the framework of the Paris Accord in terms of its determined national contribution are being implemented with strong involvement of the various segments of the national population. Following the Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity, Burundi has taken the lead in complying with the new post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. In fact, Burundi is currently revising its national biodiversity strategy and action plan to align it with the new Global Biodiversity Framework for the current decade. Burundi has even taken early initiatives with actions which are underway to preserve protected areas and to increase the national protected areas to help create a healthy living environment for its population. In terms of national policies, an arsenal of documents have been developed and is further being developed to guide actions in the field of development, following an approach that guarantees a higher quality of life thanks to efforts to protect the environment, take account of gender and equity for all. One example is the fight against waste pollution, especially plastic waste. A law regulating the use of plastic products has been in force since 2018, and palpable, tangible results have been achieved already. Burundi is focusing on youth and women's empowerment. Burundi welcomes international solidarity in the implementation of commitments and would like to reiterate its commitment to contribute, alongside other governments, in shaping global environmental policy, and calls for greater involvement of civil society groups, as well as the scientific community and the private sector, with an emphasis on empowerment of young people and women who are key players not only in the country's economic life, but also within environmental protection. Although the country has already made progress in its fight against climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution, it's worth underscoring the fact that challenges linked to insufficient technical and financial resources persist. It is within this context that we once again turn to you to ask you to support Burundi and to walk with us on our path towards Burundi, an emerging country by 2040 and a developed country by 2060. I cherish the hope of seeing our sixth session of the United Nations Environmental Assembly achieve every possible success. Long live international cooperation and long live the protection of the environment. I thank you for your attention. Thank you so much, Prime Minister of Burundi, for your speech.
Excellency Russell Dlamini, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Eswatini.
Your Excellency, the President of the United Nations Environment Assembly, His Excellency Honorable William Samoei Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, the Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. Let me begin by saying that it is a great honor that I was invited to be part of this August gathering and also to present this statement on behalf of the government of the Kingdom of Eswatini. I do bring with me regards from His Majesty the King, as well as from the Queen Mother of the Kingdom of Eswatini. I would like to start by passing our sincere gratitude to the government and the people of Kenya for their warm welcome to this great green city of Nairobi, and the hospitality accorded to me and my delegation since our arrival. Allow me to extend our profound gratitude to the Kingdom of Morocco for the tremendous work done over the past 2 years as chair of the United Nations Environment Assembly, which has culminated to this historic sixth assembly. The Kingdom of Eswatini reaffirms its total support to the presidency of the United Nations Environment Programme under the excellent leadership of Ms. Inga Anderson, Executive Director, and her team for all the good work done in facilitating this meeting. Excellencies, the Kingdom of Eswatini believes that multilateralism is the only hope for lasting global peace and for humanity to live sustainably in harmony with nature, as we can learn from indigenous people of the world. As we face the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution, let us use this sixth UNEA to renew the Nairobi spirit of international cooperation to seek lasting and just solutions to these challenges. We applaud the achievements and milestones of this assembly, which has contributed to addressing the planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution and waste management. Eswatini acknowledges UNEA's positive global progress on the adoption of the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, the Global Framework on Chemicals, Pollution and Waste, and the UNEA 5.2 resolution to end plastic pollution and forge an international legally binding agreement by the end of 2024. Amongst others, These resolutions will contribute to the national action on ending plastic pollution and enhancing the chemicals and waste management laws, as well as contributing to biodiversity conservation in Eswatini. Excellencies, on the global targets towards net zero, Eswatini has been on the receiving end of climate change induced weather events such as drought, unprecedented tropical cyclones, hail, and windstorms. These reverses some of the hard-earned development gains. Excellencies, scientific assessments continue to provide us with stark evidence that more needs to be done in addressing the environmental crisis. The Global Assessment Report of the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services details that nature is declining globally at high rates in human history. Similarly, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change special report indicates that global warming is likely to reach 1.5 degrees Celsius between 2030 and 2050 if it continues to increase at the current rate. Therefore, we are all called to take urgent and the necessary action based on the scientific guidance. Through our nationally determined contribution, Eswatini adopted its first economy-wide emissions reductions ambitious targets. Clearly, this requires transformative changes across all sectors of the economy. And in this regard, Eswatini supports an outcome that will see the principle of just transition being respected and to ensure that we leverage on these existing abundant natural resources for the security of supply of energy and enhanced investor confidence. Eswatini currently generates 100% of renewable energy, which, however, is only 15% of our total consumption. In meeting the biodiversity targets, Eswatini is amongst other initiatives pioneering the global concept of other effective conservation measures and funding national programs to increase the area under conservation by 10% of the total land area. We are therefore encouraged by the adoption of funding mechanisms such as the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund, supporting various country programs, including the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, which is currently under review. Excellencies, all the above initiatives are encompassed in the 2030 National Development Plan, which focuses on fundamentals of an inclusive, sustainable, and effective management of natural resources and the environment, building resilience to climate change, environment degradation, and disaster risk reduction through adaptation and mitigation. It is for this reason that Eswatini established a strong environment institution and developed a robust environmental framework on chemicals and waste management, environmental impact assessment, pollution control, biosafety, and management of genetic resources. In conclusion, the Kingdom of Eswatini is grateful for the support received from the development partners and welcome with great optimism the resolution on the restructuring of the Global Environment Facility. We look forward to carefully crafted partnerships that will contribute to global support in overcoming the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. I thank you.
Thank you very much to the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Eswatini for his statement. I now have the honor to invite His Excellency Ariel Henry, Prime Minister and Minister of Culture and Communication of the Republic of Haiti. We move to the next, okay. I now have the honor to invite His Excellency Edouard Ngirente, Prime Minister of the Republic of Rwanda, to address the Assembly.
Your Excellency William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya and our hosts, Excellencies, Head of States and the Government, distinguished delegate, it is a pleasure to be back in Nairobi to attend this specific session of the United Nations Environment Assembly, representing His Excellency Paul Kagame, the President of the Republic of Rwanda. I wish first to thank Your Excellency William Ruto, our hosts, the government and the people of Kenya for the warm welcome and the hospitality extended to us. I also congratulate the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, for successfully convening this important assembly. Excellencies, as we gather here today for this session of the United Nations Environment Assembly, it is high time to adopt effective, inclusive, and sustainable multilateral actions to tackle climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. We all agree that addressing the current global environmental challenges requires efficient and collective international cooperation. It is a reminder to all of us that the multilateral system is critical to overcoming the social, economic, and environmental shocks threatening life on this planet. It is also an opportunity to showcase the power of multilateralism to deliver timely, inclusive, science-based solutions to the planet's gravest environmental threats. Rwanda is a signatory to over 16 multilateral environment agreements. We have domesticated them and effectively monitor their implementation. I'm therefore glad to mention that we comply to all the obligations in those agreements. Building on the positive impact of UNEA over many years, our task is to align our contributions. Our decisions this week will shape the legacy we leave for generations to come. One of the lessons we have acquired during the decade-long journey of enforcing various environmental agreements is that national efforts alone cannot save the environment from this ever-growing pollution. It is in this regard that Rwanda stands with members of the High Ambition Coalition to call for a global target to reduce plastic production to sustainable levels, along with a dedicated fund to deliver the means of implementation. Excellencies, we must carry forward the Nairobi spirit that was present at the 5th UNEA and build on the resolutions and the commitments made during that critical session, including the Plastics Treaty Resolution co-authored by Peru and Rwanda. Our joint candidacy to host the diplomatic conference known as the Kigalima aims to speed up progress towards a life free from plastic pollution, and we ask for your support. The future is in our hands, and therefore, let's make it full of hope and aspirations of our future generations with concrete and sustainable actions. I thank you so much.
Thank you to the Prime Minister of the Republic of Rwanda for this statement. We've heard the last speaker in the opening of the high-level segment. I thank each and every one of the speakers for your leadership, your commitment, and your unconditional support to the Environment Assembly as the highest intergovernmental decision-making body on the environment. The meeting now is adjourned.